All right, welcome back to the IOY podcast. Today I got a new guest on today. Go ahead and introduce yourself, man.
Hey, I'm John Alite from Death Haven, which is Woodhaven, New York, Queens. I was an ex-enforcer for the Gambino family, the Gotti family, and the mob itself. Now an advocate for youth, troubled kids, adults, and I'm against the streets, man. I want people to live a good life.
Right. Yeah, and that's I could tell, man, through all your work and interviews that I've seen, you're doing a lot to help out, the youth and stuff now.
Well, you get one life, right? And life's about freedom, enjoying it. Look where I am. I'm out in Florida. For people that don't know, I'm out here doing some talks, some shows.
Oh yeah, it looks beautiful, man.
In prison, you don't get to see this. And so, people got to realize when you put your foot in the water the wrong way, you lose this. You don't have the opportunity to enjoy this stuff.
Right. Well, I guess, if you want to start, we can kind of talk about your early life, your family coming to the US and stuff, and the transition, for them coming here and then you being born and stuff.
Yeah. Well, my family's from Albania. So they're from a country that was suppressed, third world country, violent, Ottoman days to communism to freedom now. And I'm a big patriot of Albanians. I try to speak highly of Albanians. I hope they stick together always. And it's a big thing for me to be a patriot for the United States and for Albania, being an Albanian and an American.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because, there's it's not like a big thing, that people know of, it's kind of, they just started, popping up, right? Would you say? Like becoming more aware of the culture?
Yeah, I think, well, because of communism, there wasn't a lot of Albanians when I was a kid. Yeah. And because when communism ended, you have a lot of Albanians around the world, and people really know the Albanian culture now. Before, they didn't really know it. They would say similar to Greek, similar to Italians. They wouldn't give the Albanian culture its own identity. I'm one of those guys that very proud to be Albanian. I give us an identity, and the world gives us an identity now.
Yeah, well, that's good. That like I said, it's becoming more aware of who they are and the culture. Because it's always good to know the roots and have someone like you to be able to talk about it on a big platform. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I try to be as positive as I can about life. Yeah. A lousy life and struggling in prisons, and some of the stuff I went through. I try to help people realize it's just not worth it. It's not worth the streets to lose your freedom.
Yeah. So what was your kind of your early life like, before joining the whole mob, becoming an associate and everything?
I grew up with famous guys that were friends of my father. My father grew up in Rivington at Delancey Street in Lower East Side, New York, which was a very serious hub of the mob. And you had guys like Vito Genovese and Lucky Luciano, and his cousin Charlie Black Luciano was my father's partner. And one of the guys from the Gambino family was very famous. Other guys like Al Greco from North Jersey. These guys are famous gangsters. And Fat Andy Ruggiano, who I was raised around him and his sons since I'm a kid. And he was one of the guys that got made on the Murder Inc. in Albert Anastasia, who was the boss and our neighbor to the Gambino family prior to John Gotti. So I've been with the rock stars of the mob at a very early age before Gotti.
Damn. So, before the transition, well, I guess, what kind of made you want to pursue that route? Was it, being around so much violence and stuff, that it kind of just, you're like, okay, I'm already doing this kind of stuff. I'm just going to go for it now.
Yeah, I mean, I was real athletic. My father had me training since I'm a baby in sports, boxing, baseball. I ended up getting a full ride scholarship in baseball. But I was exposed to gangsters and street guys in gangs in my neighborhood very early. All my friends were very wild. They were 12, 13, 14 years old, all in jails, juvies, already shooting guys, stabbing guys. I wasn't. I was actually not a bad kid, just, a kid on the street, but not a bad kid. I developed to like my friends were, but at a later age. And then I surpassed them all. And I end up really getting bad in the street and doing some serious stuff between the shootings and killings, unfortunately.
Yeah, and wasn't the first, active, I guess was stabbing, right? At age 17 was like your very first, you know, transition to
Uh,
the violence like that.
I,
I mean, fighting and
it
stuff
with
was
a knife.
before that.
Yeah, with a knife was, I guess at about 14, 15, I baseball batted somebody for
Oh, okay.
a guy called George Gaddy, not Gotti, Gaddy, who was a Lucchese guy. And he was the local bookmaker, and I used to date his niece. And his brother was, Lou was also a wise guy and tough guy. And I grew up around these guys as a kid. So, um, again, I liked these guys. They were gentlemen. It was a different era. And I looked up to them. I didn't look up to other people. I looked up to the gangsters I was surrounded by.
Yeah, I mean, because when you're a kid, it's easier to kind of idolize that, and especially when you see them on a personal level, versus on TV. I mean, you had the right there, you were right there in that front line, kind of seeing all this stuff.
Yeah, you got to remember, see, like, even when we do, like, me and you talking off camera, we joke around a lot. A lot of people see the serious side, but when I was with some of these guys, like George Gaddy, he liked to joke around. He was like a real sharp dresser, but we played games and jokes on each other. So it was a lot of fun being around these guys. So it wasn't just all serious business like everybody thinks it's serious. And it was a lot of playing and joking. And, we'd hit each other with cakes and, have water balloon fights. And you wouldn't see any serious gangsters in this life, but I did. So,
Yeah.
when you see them like that, you say, now, wow, this is great, man. These are real good guys. This is like, and I tell everybody, instead of joining them up, join a bowling team. You can have the same thing without the violence of going to jail. So,
Yeah, that's true, man. But I guess, with all the violence and everything that was going on with you, the what, was the act that kind of made you, all right, I want to be a shooter.
I think as I'm raised around these guys I mentioned earlier, they're very serious, these guys. So they're guys that got a lot of respect because they were known to be violent and also earners, but they were the top echelon of that life. And so I knew to get there, you had to really be taken serious. And to be taken serious, you had to be able to do the things that they would talk about or try to groom you for, and that was to be violent. And I learned to do those things.
Yeah, I mean, because that was your main job. I mean, kind of, being an enforcer and doing the hits, because you were doing the work that, that they might not want to have done, because you couldn't become a made man, right? And you kind of had to do the grunt work, is what they looked at it as.
Exactly. Yeah, I was considered a lot of these guys as like almost a nephew, like Fat Andy Ruggiano is almost like a grandson. I'm in his house constantly. So I had a different attachment to them because I grew up in their houses. So although I couldn't be in that position, I was trusted more than the average guy because of my being as a child growing up with them. So I was an insider, not an outsider. And I learned to do what I thought would get me to the top of the food chain around other guys, and that was to be violent.
Right. Yeah, and that sure the hell has worked. I mean, you couldn't have become officially a boss, but you were looked at as one.
Yeah, I mean, there's shows out about me like Perfect Gangster, and there's guys that I either was involved in shooting or killing or that killed family members, and they do those talks. These are guys that were my enemies, and they'll talk about listening to me, guys and captains answering to me on the street. So, people that are familiar with the life understand the what authority I had on the street, as they would consider me, I guess a street boss or whatever word people want to use. But people that they fear of obviously they're going to respect at any level, and that's what I brought to the table, I guess.
Yeah, and you're pretty open about it. Now speaking, and so how is that important to you about being so open about all the people that you were involved with, shooting, stabbing, killing, murders? I mean, because I mean, in previous interviews, I mean, the list goes on. You know what I mean? Oh, did it cut out?
Well, I tried. Are you there now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Are you here? Can you? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what the difference is I try to be very open about names, places, dates, so people know I'm the real deal. I don't do what most of these other guys do. If you watch some of these shows and podcasts, they're not street guys. They're not guys that we were involved in anything. they're just repeating a story that's not true that they hear somewhere else. They fabricate stories, exaggerate stories because they don't have the knowledge. And the guys that claim they were doing those things, they talk in innuendos, they talk, and they're able to talk outright because their cases are closed. But you know, and I always use certain guys as references. They won't talk specifically about what they specifically did, because what I say is on the back of a baseball card, a football card, are stats. These guys don't have any real stats, so they're not able to talk the way I do. So they're selling kids and young guys and some girls. They're selling youth a dream of bullshit, and I call them out on that. I diminish their stories. I diminish who they say they are. I don't care what position they say they have. I don't care if they're boss. I don't care if they're underboss. I don't care if they're captains. That means nothing to me or any other street guy. What they want to know is, what did you do specifically? And no one seems to ask these guys that straight out. Tell us about how it was to get in that car. Tell us what you did. Tell us where'd you get your weapons from. Tell us who the person was. Tell us who was with you. Tell us who drove. And most of these guys that are on these shows are all guys that were talking or cooperating. So they're able to say this. The reason they don't say it, because 99.5% of them haven't done anything. Or they did one thing and live off it the rest of their life, and they con the next kid to try to become me, right? And I don't want the next kid to end up being like me, and because it's a dead end life. So I try to be as open as possible and give as much information as possible so they know I'm real.
Yeah, and by the way that you do go about this, I mean, from I seen your podcast, other interviews you did. I mean, you give out dates. I mean, you give out names and everything. So you're able to do this, and like, being able to do that, a lot of the other mob guys that were real. I mean, if they never got caught up, I mean, they can't go out and speak about these things and and try and be as helpful as you can. I mean, they can do something else, but I mean, you with your story, I mean, that's what makes you different, is that you can actually talk about all of these things. And, you were only convicted on like one or two of these whole murders, right?
I pled out to 4 murder conspiracies, 2
Mhm.
murders, I think more than 8 shootings, more than 2 dozen baseball battings, sports business, drugs, more than I think it was 100 kilos, something like that. They whatever it is, their life sentence charges, and I pled out to all of them and took my plea deal and ended up doing on this case 10 years, United States. I did almost 3 in Brazil, and I've done probably 5 in and out prior to that, to this case. So I did, like I say, about 18 years, almost 20 years in and out of jail. So, and by the way, talk about my podcast, there's the Mafia and the Man, and I'll show you the man. This is Mike Dowd from the 7-5, famous guy. Everybody knows who he is. He's a character and a half. We laugh a lot.
What up, Mike?
Waiting on you, motherfucker. You know it.
I'm waiting on you, man. But no, I mean, that's cool.
So yeah, it's got great stories. People that don't know, watch his show 7-5, and we're in the middle of a couple of projects now, new ones.
Yeah, I guess since you're talking about that, let me ask you, how did you guys form that? Because you're ex-mob and he's ex-cop.
Mike's more of a street guy than most of the street guys on the street. So,
yeah.
and he was in the 7-5 in Brooklyn, one of the most dangerous precincts in all of this country, actually. So he hustled all over the place. We did business at the 7-5, and we had a lot of mutual friends. And I knew his reputation since I was a kid, and we're about the same age. So on the street, we all hear of everybody, of each other, and so we were a good fit. We joke around, and one thing we talk about is loyalty, and we survived. Both of us survived the situation.
Yeah, because I mean, you both had a hell of a past, and now you're able to, tell these stories, and help other people out, like you said, help the kids out and everything else, other, not even just kids, adults, that may have went through either one of your guys' situations, so that's, great that you guys are able to do that.
Well, you can live, 100% of your life good, and you make that one mistake, that fatal mistake, bad mood, you do something stupid, whether it's drunk driving, whatever, you can ruin your life. So we go around and we talk to juvenile detention centers, we talk to colleges, we talk to inner city kids, We go into the old neighborhood, Brownsville, where Mike was on a job, where I hung out and moved around. And we try to talk to those kids about, they deserve a life and don't give it away for nonsense. So we try to keep the message positive and make sure everybody really gets the idea, because between the two of us, we did, about 35 years in prison. One of our buddies just came home now. I want to give him a shout out by the way. He's from Beantown, Boston. He did 27 years, 20 straight, and he just came home. So I want to say hello to my man, Paulie Allen. So Paulie, doing it right now. He got it right. Finally, he's doing the right thing, and he's going to enjoy his life now.
Yeah, I mean that's good, man. I mean, because that's a long time to be locked up, for anybody, and then to come out, and try and do something good, it's just, you got to figure it out. It's kind of, like you kind of be a mentor and, help him out and kind of put him in the right direction, or, anything. Cause I mean, he probably got stories too, but that's up to him if he's, open with that kind of stuff, you know what I mean?
He's going to be around. He's going to be around. He's got a lot of stories still. He went to prison at 17 and he was a hell of an athlete, could have been a pro hockey player. A great guy, tough guy. And, he grew up as a kid, unfortunately, in prisons. He wasted his whole life there. So he can tell a lot of people a lot of stories, especially the fake tough guys that people it just ain't worth it. So, you want to play that role. You don't want to be another Paulie Allen coming out of jail close to 50 years old. That's not what life's about. So he's going to capture life now, do the right thing. And he's got a lot to share with people out on the street, not to do the same thing and make those mistakes.
Right. No, that's good, because, you don't know how many people you could impact and save, just by telling your stories, and how horrific and, everything they were,
We save one is good enough. And we save a lot more than that. But, if these guys knew some of the places we were at, penitentiaries and situations with life and death in Brazil, so it's crazy. What's that, Mike? And you know what people don't, like Mike just said, it's the hardship of not what we went through there only, but what you go through when you come home, because it's very difficult and people want to test you. So you got to overlook that and realize life's different, and don't get off course, because there's so many people we're trying to help out here. And if we screw that up, we're not just screwing up ourselves, we're screwing up everybody we're helping. If we can't do it, they'll never be able to do it. So we got to show them we can do it. So that heart and that depression and some of the emotions that we don't talk about on here, there's plenty of them. And hopefully, it resonates with people that are thinking about getting in trouble and how to handle things. Just not worth it, man. Look in the mirror and say, listen, I'll keep my freedom.
Yeah, that's true, man. I mean, because it's not where you want to end up. That's where nobody wants to end up. But, certain situations and certain things happen, in life. And, you think you have to prove something to some people that don't even give a shit about you. And then now you're sitting in there for how long, you know what I mean? And there
You
goes
want
your
to prove
life.
something? You want to prove something? You got to get in the ring like Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Go make money legitimately. When you're out on the street, what are you proving? You're not making any money out here. What do you, everybody can get hurt. Everybody can get beat up by the next guy. That doesn't prove anything. So, there's a million guys that get hurt. People ask that all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, did you get hit here? Did you get hit? Of course you did. That's part of the street. You're not going to beat everybody. And if you're going to be real on the street, you'll end up like me. You'll end up being stabbed up. You'll end up being battered. You'll end up being shot. That's just part of putting yourself out there on the street. But what does it prove? I didn't get paid for that. I caught a lot of beatings out here. It says, and I gave a lot, but you don't get paid. If you want to get paid and prove something, how tough you get in the ring. Join up, get in the ring, go to UFC, go to MMA, get into the ring as a boxer, do whatever, if that's what you want to do, but get paid for it.
Right.
Out here, you don't get paid for anything.
Yeah, exactly. Except especially in
But
this day
you
and
get
age.
paid. Mike's right. You get paid, but you get paid. The only difference, you get paid, you go to prison. That's what happens. You're going to pay what you like. We talk about, one way or another, you're going to pay.
Right. And since, we're talking about the prison thing and you brought up the Brazil, I mean, we should kind of talk about that a little bit, because some people might not know how horrible it is out there, in that prison, so, I mean, what was some of your experiences in there that were kind of, or I guess the most shittiest?
Well, the most shittiest is when you're staying loyal to a mafia with people that believe in it. And I'm sitting in that penitentiary and I find out all the guys that have titles bosses, underbosses, captains of the Gambino family, Gotti Jr. himself. They're all meeting the FBI, and they're working with them. They're giving me up and giving other people up. They're informing, and I try to keep the facts to facts. You can't change the dates. While I was sitting in those penitentiaries, these guys were headlines of the papers that they're ratting, and they're singing to the government. They try to spin it because that's the street, right? They'll try to spin the truth. But the facts are facts. It's paperwork. These guys were all informants. I believed in a life that's bullshit, and I try to tell everybody about that now. So when you sit in a penitentiary like Brazil and guys are killing each other left and right, and the conditions are horrific as far as humanitarian. There's rats all over the place. It rains inside. There's no water. You have bugs that are incredible. Conditions of food, rice and beans, and big jugs are full of rat piss and shit. You got to eat it because that's all you got. And the violence, you're watching guys die every day there. It's a third world country of nothing but violence. So, you start to realize you just left your family to be loyal to the mob that's not loyal. So you had a whole family, the Bonanno family. The boss was wearing a wire, and all the captains were cooperating. And I believe it was 14 or 16 of them. You had Gotti cooperating, and you had all his guys, his captains and made guys. I think there was about 10 or 12 of them. And they're all talking while I'm in the penitentiary, and I'm smiling to myself saying, who's the idiot now? So I was a dummy. I believed in that. And you can't spin facts and dates. So, they try. But that's the lesson for me to tell kids. Don't buy into what I bought into.
Right. And, because, I think it was like, 54 people that were testifying against you, right?
Yeah, I guess you check some facts out. Yeah, 54 guys were giving information and testifying against me and wearing wires on me, informants, and doing what Gotti was doing, meeting the government. And, these guys aren't what people think. That's what I'm trying to tell kids. I says, they're not the gangsters they think they are, and I'll give you some facts. And I brought this up on one or two other shows, but not that as often as I should have. Gotti Jr.'s father got hurt bad in prison. He's an older guy. A guy stomps him. He's home 2 years later. The son did nothing about it. Now, this is a father and son. Forget about the mob. Where's the loyalty to your own father? When Sammy Gravano testifies against Gotti, gives him a life sentence, and he suffers in jail and dies. Gotti, his uncles, his cousins, as a family, do nothing to help the father and go after Sammy. And Gotti's best man at his wedding gets gunned down in front of his children in his house, right in front of his house in his driveway 10 times, and Gotti does nothing about it. So if you see he doesn't do anything for his father, he doesn't do anything for his best friend, he doesn't do anything for his best man, do you think he's a gangster? He's not a gangster. These guys are frauds, and they're trying to sell you into believing they're tough guys. But if they don't defend them, what do you think they're going to do for you?
Nothing.
That's why they don't like me talking, because, I give the true facts about that. They can't spin this stuff. Nothing happened to any of these guys, and this should be an education for the kids that are looking up to this life. It's bullshit.
Yeah. And you worked for the Gotti family, right, as well. And, how did that come about,
Because I was friendly and still friends with the Ruggiano family, who was the leadership and the bosses then. When they went away to prison, the Gotti stepped in his shoes, and I just stepped in with him next. So, you're already in the neighborhood. Everybody knows you. And that was my next guy that took over. So it's like any other, work for Merrill Lynch. Your boss leaves, a new one comes in. That's who you work for. And I already had the reputation. I already had the loyalty, that known to be very loyal to this thing, meaning the mob and our family, that I stepped in, and I just continued into being a violent guy for them.
So what did they? Oh, go ahead.
Money guy, violent guy. I was their personal enforcer.
Damn. So they kind of have you go and do hits then for a majority of the work that you would do for them, or?
Yeah, listen, if you ask, here's another thing I guess people that are out there. If you ask a simple question to Gotti or his lawyers or anybody else, besides me, who'd they have doing any kind of work from? They had nobody. He had a bunch of flunky dummies around him. The father had guys around him. The son had nobody around him. I was the only guy. There's nobody else that was a shooter. Nobody else that was around that was a young guy could hit the streets, stab guys, baseball bat guys, rob, do the things that they needed done. There was an old, his best man was Bob Borrello, but he wasn't a young guy. He was a tough guy. He was a killer. He was a good friend of mine also. When he gets killed, I'm in prison. I went nuts that they weren't doing anything about it. But if he ain't around, I'm not around. Who does he got? Nobody. He had absolutely not one guy. And through history, people got to check this. That's why I said people got to, if they're going to talk, if they're going to research or they want to know about this, find out who is one guy. He didn't have anybody, not one. This is the joke of the mob and the bullshit they try to sell to people. They look for another guy like me to step in my shoes to help them have the reputation and the names they get from guys like me. So it's something that I owe the rest of these kids out here not to end up like me.
Yeah, and and that sounds like you really are. I mean, you're really helping everyone out. By just telling your story. I mean, because that's the main thing. And then now you got all the books out. You got the Second Chance program. So what is your favorite part about the Second Chance program?
Second Chance program, I'm trying to help people when they come out of prison be able to get jobs in any field that they want. They want to get their life back, do the right thing. We got to make it accessible to them to do the right thing and become a good citizen. If you don't let them do that, you cuff their hands and say the rest of your life you got to work at McDonald's only, or you got to sweep floors. That's not right. They already paid for their crime, and they should have the ability and a chance to do something right with themselves and end up in a position that I'm end up right now, doing movies, doing TV shows, doing magazines, and speaking to troubled youth. And hopefully the next guy like me goes out and does the right thing also. There's always going to be a handful of people that, screw up again. I mean, that's life, but you get any position, people do that. So, hopefully with probation, they don't keep trying to, stack the deck against them. So they go back to jail with violations and nonsense, and unless it's something serious. And, by going and doing these talks, I think that I'm helping, try to change some of these laws. Some of them have changed. Florida has some good laws actually to be able to get jobs again. So, there's some good states. Governor DeSantis has some good programs here for guys that have been in trouble before, and he give you that opportunity to live a good life again and girls to live a good life again. So hopefully they do that.
That's a good way. That's a great thing you do right there, man. My buddy had a question too that he wanted me to ask you, because we're talking about this topic. His name's Colby Roy. He said, why do you think kids get into crime? Now that you work with them, you got firsthand experience with it. It's kind of like, why did you get into crime? Kind of thing.
Insecurity, testosterone, want to be a tough guy, let people think, walking around, you're well known or respected, but you're well known or respected for the wrong things. Usually the gentlemen are the quiet ones, the tough ones. When you see a guy in the ring, they're all business because they're very secure. They got to step in that ring by themselves. But when guys are able to go in packs, it's usually a weakness, including myself. There's somewhere along there, even though I'm the guy doing the work for the rest of the guys, I shouldn't have got involved in these organizations. Self-esteem, guys that really care about themselves, guys that have good family values through their parents, have the tendency to have a more concrete foundation, not to hit the street. And so, again, that's why I bring up these guys like Sammy Gravano. He keeps talking about he's 80 years old. He's still talking about being a killer. But the reality is, and you guys check it out, he only shot and killed one guy out of 19. That's a fact. One. Ask him where he was for the rest of these shootings. And let people do interviews and ask specific questions like I just said. They won't do the interviews with you guys because they're perpetrating a fraud. And I'm going to make sure the kids know that. I go by detail of about 40 shootings I did. These guys are doing one or two and sell themselves as these massive tough guy killers, and it's not true. So, I got to call them out, and I got to make people start asking the real questions to them. So they stop telling you stories about this guy or that guy, and they throw names around like, we were kids. We're not allowed to mention names. In the mob, you're not allowed to say who you are. These guys throw names around because they don't have anything to talk about themselves. So they're telling war stories. 3/4 of the stories or even more so are bullshit. There's one or two guys out there doing these podcasts that are legit guys. But for the most part, they're all clowns. And, and I'll start with guys like Sammy. So You want to have that title? Tell everybody what you did to get there. Stop telling a story about I sat down with the Neil Della Croce, or I sat down with Paul Castellano. No one gives a shit about who you sat down with. Tell a story what you did, and this way the kids can really see who's full of shit. And I hope people that hear this start asking them those specific questions, because you can't bullshit around those. Because you got to do what I do. You got to say the name of a location. You got to say where you got the gun. You got to go through details, how you did it, and go through each violent act they claim and see where they were.
Yeah.
And then you'll get to the bottom who's real.
And that's what I was going to say, because you made like a scorecard, right, of, all the people that, violent crimes and stuff you did. And, from stabbings, shootings, killings, so you did that. And so now you're able to do somewhat of a head count now, like, where it was when it took place, and that's in one of your books, right?
Yeah, I do it on a lot of shows. I'll throw out 15, 20 names real quick. I'll talk about who I shot, where I shot them, who was there, who drove, who were the witnesses against me, what year, what time, so people know that it's not bullshit, So, I'll throw out like, Nicky Pasqua. When I shot him on July 3rd on 85th Street on his front porch in 1994 or 1995. One of those 2 years. I think it was 95. So, I give the name, location. My cousin, Patsy Adriano, was with me. He was the driver. We drove his Acura, right? I got a good memory. I shot Mike Lavigny and protocols in the chest. And I believe that was 1984. 100 witnesses in there. I shot another guy, Paul Forgione, in front of Gotti Sr.'s mother's house, Fanny, on a conduit. Eddie Earl set him up for me. He worked for Richie Logan, his bus company. The guy that drove with me was Joey DiCorrali. We had another guy, Keith Pellegrino's Corvette convertible. Police went to his house and he told them I had his Corvette convertible. These are facts, right? One after another. The Krasinowski brothers, John and James, I baseball batted them. Johnny Keegan, I baseball batted him. Kid Johnny, I baseball batted him in the head of 91st Street, 101st Avenue, because he robbed my sister's apartment. And he testified in behalf of John Gotti Jr. at his trial. So facts, right? One, names. Stevie Newell just passed away, God rest his soul. Became a friend of mine again, but I shot him after Gotti said he would protect him. And the Gottis did nothing for him. Asked him actually to kill me. That's laughable. But he did my Perfect Gangster, and he talks about me himself, about that everybody's full of shit. They were all afraid of me. So, and it ain't about them being afraid of me. It's just about trying to tell kids, don't buy into these guys, because you don't see any of them doing what I just said. And that's just a handful. I could keep going. You know that. Yeah.
So, I mean, with how you reach out to these families now, because I think that's what you kind of mentioned, on some of your other interviews. So, like, what is one of the best encounters you had with the family, and what was like one of the worst that, didn't work out, when you try to apologize or whatnot?
I baseball batted Johnny Keegan for Joe O'Kane. Joe O'Kane was a guy that was around me later on, says he was around Junior Gotti. And while he was around Junior Gotti, we stabbed him up. We robbed him twice. Gotti did nothing about it. But Joe O'Kane got stabbed up and killed in prison, in Kane prison. And that doesn't surprise me, because he couldn't stand on his own 2 feet. He kept running to me, but he had a problem with Johnny Keegan. I came out of my house. Joe O'Kane came to my house to get me, and I baseball batted Johnny Keegan. And I felt bad my whole life. I knew the guy since him and his brother, Brian. They lived around the corner from me. They were nice kids, tough kids. They weren't wrong. Joe was a weasel. And Joe worked for me at the time. So I went and I did that. And I tried to apologize to him. He wouldn't accept it. And I don't blame him for not accepting it. I mean, I got to eat that the rest of my life. That was a bad decision on my part. And, and God's my witness. I feel bad, because these kids were tough kids and good kids. But, that's the terrible life of it. And then there's people like the Got Her Up family. I had the brother killed, and his brother he does my show, Perfect Gangster, and he speaks about me. And, he talks truthfully about me. He might not like me, but he talks facts. And he said, if Johnny said he shot 20 people, double that number to 40. So if somebody listens to the Perfect Gangster, they'll see what he says. And the daughter got in touch with me, and, I reached out and I met with the family. We all talked. We cried. We talked about the lousy life that it got us all. And, unfortunately, you can't take this stuff back. I wish I could. But the only thing I can do is try to take some of that shitty stuff and do something positive with like I do now.
Yeah. I mean, god damn, that's gotta be something, to try and, talk to these people, I mean, because, they're either gonna be pissed off or, they're gonna hear you out, and then when they hear you out, like you said, they have the situation where they're just, so emotionally crying that they know that you both were wrapped up in, the life, and it's just like they
Well,
understand to some degree.
people are looking for, some answer that'll justify. There is no answer. The
Mhm.
answer is we were all nuts on the street, wild, trying to kill each other. Some of us survived, some of us didn't. And there is no justification of taking a life. The only life I ever said that was justified for taking, and I don't regret it, is Johnny Depp. He gang raped a girl, shot her boyfriend, and we had him killed. So I don't, for that, I still haven't apologized. I won't apologize. He was convicted of gang rape and he beat her half to death. So the family does a lot of talking against me, and I gotta say, where were they when he was raping girls? So that's all I can say to them. They might not like that he's dead, but they didn't help those girls that were being tortured and gang raped and beat up by him. So they know what he was, and that's consequences of this life. You do shit things like that, you're gonna pay for it. And I'm not judge and jury, but I don't regret doing it either. So it's a fact, and I can't lie either. While I'm sitting here, I got to tell the truth of how I still feel. That doesn't get justified for me. That he gang raped him. So he lost his life, and I still believe he deserved to lose it.
Right. And when you were doing these things, were you like say if you couldn't get a hold of this person, that you were going after, like he robbed you or did something, would you go after the families, or that was, something morally that you wouldn't go after them or something like that?
The first week I was in prison, I had Johnny Depp killed. I told my cousin to kill him, and I was in prison. I had him killed. So people talk about the strength of how much power I had on the street. Of course, I had it. I was in Brazil. I was ordering things. So there is no justification, but we had the ability. I had the ability. I had tons of guys to do whatever I wanted when I wanted, and that it's just part of the life.
Yeah, but I mean, would you like wrap up the family members, like the actual?
Oh no, I didn't hear that what you were saying. No,
Oh,
I stayed away from. Listen. The only time you tell somebody you're going to go near somebody's family is if they try to go near your family. If you try to go near your family, listen, I don't care what position somebody is in. They go near your family, they got family too. They got wives, they got kids. So you make it very open and public to people. You go near my family, and we'll see if one of your family doesn't disappear. Because we don't do that. That's not part of our life. Maybe other organizations do that. We don't do that. But it's very easy to take somebody's family, especially if they're not in the life. So when one thing that works one way, it works back the other way. I make that very clear over my life on the street. Even till today, I make that very clear. I just, it's something that we don't do, and I don't believe anybody should do.
yeah, because they didn't do nothing. They didn't have anything to do with that involvement. Say he robbed you. I mean, it's just like, why would you go after them? They didn't have
Well,
anything to do with it.
I think they go after them because they're weak. If somebody they want to be what I used to be, then be it. But then come see me. If you're going to keep talking, what people do now with the internet, you know what they are. The guys that aren't talking on this internet that really want that done, they're not talking. Maybe they'll try to do it one day. Maybe maybe they have the ability to do it. Maybe not.
Mhm.
But they wouldn't be talking the way they talk. So it's again. I tell kids all the time, when someone's chirping and weak, and they're constantly yapping and they're talking and they're writing, and especially that's why I understand the bullying thing now. Kids in schools, they go to school, someone's bullying them, they go home, they're still bullying them. They can't get away from them. And the adults that are doing that on the internet, and young kids see that and they follow the lead. They're responsible. So you have a lot of this crazy Gotti family does that, and they're not embarrassed or ashamed of themselves because you got kids watching this, and then they do it. So they're responsible for making younger kids, and people like that are responsible for making younger kids react the same way in a bad manner.
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, it's not something you want to teach your kids, because I mean, but now you can just go online and just start talking shit. You know, like you said, the kids get bullied at school and they go home, they got their phone and they're still talking shit, you know. So it's just like they see their parents doing it, you know, so it's just like, you know, to them it's normal and it's okay, but in reality, it's not, you know. I mean, it's still bullying, you know, even if
Only
it's
weak,
online.
weak,
Oh,
weak people do it.
yeah, yeah.
People, envy people, people that don't have nothing in their life. They're not tough. You know, they just miserable themselves, jealous. And so really, we should all be laughing at that every time you see him. You got to tell them, listen, you want 10 seconds of fame? Go ahead, go get it. Go get your 10 seconds and make fun of them a little bit. And that's moving.
Yeah. You know, so I guess one thing I wanted to bring up too, you know, because we're talking about all the mental stuff, you know, prison stuff, you know, is that, you know, you went to prison and you were in solitary confinement for 7 years, right?
Yeah, basically all of it. Yeah.
So how the hell did that happen and why did it go down like that?
Well, you're going to, you know, it depends on the prison. When you get into fights, you're going to go to the hole. You're going to go to the hole for investigations. You're going to go to the hole in Brazil because of my situation. There's a video out from Interpol saying I was the most dangerous violent criminal ever in their country. The chief of Interpol did an Associated Press live interview at the time and said it. So they're going to put me in different situation than the average guy. They put you in a leadership role, so they in different prisons, so they put you in solitary. There's a slew of reasons why you end up in solitary. And guys like Paulie, I just mentioned, I believe he did 9 years. And so I think he did his straight too.
Damn.
You know, guys don't realize what there. So, you know, I got exceptional respect for him as a nice guy. But not only is a nice guy, when he was in the street, he was a serious kid, but he didn't act like that. He just act like had fun, played sports, this and that. But you get on the wrong side of him, he could be a different guy. So this is, you know, why I tell kids there's a lot of tough guys out there. You don't need to try to behave like one or act like one. Doesn't get you nowhere but prison. And the idea is not to go there, enjoy your life. So, you know, let things slide off your shoulder and move on.
What was you know, a day for you, you know, day by day, you know, while being in there for 7 years like that?
Well, I didn't do it straight, but I did a majority of it and got out, went back in for a couple of years. So between Brazil and New York, when I came back, I did about 9 years without in a yard. I didn't go in any yards. I went to cages. So those days, you know, when people say, "What do?" You wake up at 4:35, have breakfast, you eat your breakfast, you get up and say, "What do you do now?" You're sitting in four walls. You wait for lunch. Lunch is at 11 o'clock. So when you get through lunch, and you know, there's no radios, there's no books. It depends on what your situation is. Sometimes you get your hands on a book. Sometimes you get yourself with a radio. But when they keep shifting you, transferring cell to cell, they don't give it to you jail to jail. You don't buy commissary because they're giving you the diesel treatment, what we call diesel treatment. And then when you get dinner, it's at 4 or 5, depending. And you eat your dinner and you get through the night. Now, what do? A couple push-ups, run in place, do some burpees. And you got through a long day. Those minutes seem like hours. Those hours seem like days. Those days seem like weeks and months. So when you get through one struggling day, it's only one day. You're going to do it the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. It's so repetitive that you're going to go nuts. It's just very, very difficult to do mentally. You got to get used to it. At the beginning, like all of us, we suffer. Guys will cry. Guys will be banging on doors. Guys will be screaming. Guys will just sit there quietly depressed. Guys kill themselves. So, and I had a ton of friends. Some killed themselves in there. So those are the things, that stories that nobody tells. And, you know, it's just a terrible existence. Put your dog in a cage and see what he does when you leave him there for a couple hours. He's barking and crying and screaming forever. Then he's just quiet, sleeping, out of depression. But if you keep him there for years at a time, imagine that. And that's an animal.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, goddamn, you know, people don't really, you know, speak on that, you know, like the whole prison thing, you know, when it comes to that, you know, like, because I know that you said that, you know, that people die in there and they take it chin up as a man, you know, and serve out their sentence. And you said you live like people like that go through that live like animals because that's what they treat them, throw them in the cage like a dog.
Well, check this out. Say you were in prison, right? And you're one of guys in there with your hands, with a knife, whatever, and you got a year left, and I step to you and I challenge you every which way, whether with your commissary, whether with your clothes, your shoes, whether I try to punk you in a chow hall. How do you handle that? You got a year left. I got 30 years. Now what do? You can't just walk off because it's a dangerous situation in jail. Some prisons, depends on where you're at. And if you just walk off, people are going to think you're a punk. The next guy comes after you. If you do something, you might end up with a 20, 30-year stint instead of 1 year left. It's a chess game to play in prison. It's not as simple as everybody thinks. And you put yourself in that situation once you go to prison. That's the problem.
Yeah. And so, after they already have them in there, that's why, they seem not to give a shit, like you said, because it's like playing a game. It gives them more reason to be like, oh, well, you put yourself in this situation, so deal with it.
Yeah, well, a lot of these people that work within the system are no good too. And, that's some of the things I talk about and advocate to hopefully change. Because they get away with abusing inmates, and I'd say majority of them don't deserve it. There's some that do, including myself at different points in my life when I was younger. I was always looking for problems and trouble, and, and you'll get it. And then there's situations when the guards are just no good son of a bitches, just because they're miserable at home with their life or whatever else. So, I'm hopefully that there's something that's done about the way they treat some of the inmates. And, these are some of the stuff I advocate with, and Mike advocates with me, and this is what we do.
Yeah. No, that's great that you do that. And, who better else to do it than, somebody that's been through it,
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I need to wrap up.
Yeah.
We got to go off. We got another thing. You got any other question before we go off?
Just tell the people where to find you.
All right. You can find my website, johnalite.com. You can find my Instagram, True John Alite. You can find me on Netflix, Fear City. You can find I have 5 books out there. Gotti's Rules, one of them. Mafia International, Darkest Hour, Death Haven, and Prison Rules. My different authors, George Anastasia, Susan Pike, and Nicholas. Excuse me.
Oh, you good?
And so, I have a lot of contacts besides that. Mike, where can they find you? Mike's on Instagram also. And they can see our show, the Elite Show, the Mob, the Mafia, and the Man.
Yeah, well, thank you so much again for coming on, man. I appreciate it. And, I'll let you know when I post this and everything. Let me hit end on here real quick.